Now, as to how long this crucifixion took, it depends on what part of the Bible you read, but generally speaking, Jesus was arrested at midnight and taken to the priest at 3 in the morning and put before Pilate at 6, crucified at 9, then a great darkness covered the whole land at 12, died at 3 in the afternoon, then was taken down and buried around 6 in the evening. So by my calculations, we're looking somewhere around a period of 18 hours that the entire process took. I don't know how much torture or what point it was tortured. I know that crucifixion is not as simple of a dying process as it's put out to believe. The thing that is that you can't breathe whenever you relax. Your entire body moves forward in it. It's the diaphragm in a position where you can't breathe, so you have to physically pull yourself back up in order to take a breath, which is painful at that point. So you die. Crucifixion, you die generally of suffocation. So not knowing exactly how long this took, I will, just for the sake of it, give him the entire 18 hours. I'll say that he endured torture and humiliation and pain and suffering for the entire 18-hour period, although that's obviously not completely accurate. Just for the sakes of argument, we'll say that there was 18 hours. That was part of his gift, was the pain and suffering of a perfect human who actually was not perfect. And then the final act of this gift was his death, which meant that his Father had given his only Son so that you could be saved. Now, one thing is that he didn't stay dead. Obviously, according to the story, he arose on the third day. So, at the very most there, he took a death nap or a little break from the activities for 3 days, and then he rose again. So, the maximum amount of time that gift actually happened was 18 hours of torture and 3 days of being dead, after which he rose. So I have to ask, where was the gift? What was the gift that he gave to save man? Okay, he gave his Son, which suffered for 18 hours. Now, you know that most religions say that they are God's children. They're children of God. Yet, God's plan for you is far different than it was for his only Son. His plan for you, if you don't believe in him, is for you to be tortured in hell forever. I mean, you're like his stepson. His real son could not sin. He knew that his daddy spook was there in heaven waiting for him. He knew that he would be crucified for finite death and that he would rise again to be with his Father in heaven. That's what his real son does. Now, his stepkids, they're treated a lot differently. They don't have the ability to know for sure that their father's waiting for them. They do not have the ability to know that their death is finite. They don't have the privilege of being born unable to sin. And their pain and suffering is highly inconsequential to this beast God thing. If you were his son, you could save every human that was ever born by suffering for 18 hours and dying for 3 days. If you're a human type son of God, all the suffering and all the pain and misery that you could take throughout eternity would not be enough to save your one soul. And all the suffering and pain of the entire group of mankind that did not go to heaven would not be enough suffering and pain to atone for even one soul. Do you actually believe that you are the children of God? Have you ever given thought to the concept of eternity? I think about what is an eternity? What is never ending? We as humans don't tend to think in those terms, since nothing that we deal with on a daily basis has the ability to be thought of as eternal. Let's say that in Salt Lake City, out in the salt flats, that there's a little bird, and it picks up 1 grain of salt and holds it in its mouth, And its goal is to take this grain of salt and deposit it in Death Valley. Let's say that it takes this bird 1 year to get over to Death Valley and drop this grain of salt that it took from Utah. The bird has spent its whole life doing this. It has to produce an offspring that has to hatch and grow and fly back to Utah and pick up another grain of salt and take its entire lifetime flying it back to Death Valley. By the time that you had a hole the size of the Grand Canyon in Utah, and you had a 14,000 foot tall mountain in Death Valley, by the birds delivering the grains of sand or the grains of salt, you still wouldn't have ticked the first second of eternity off. Eternity would not have even begun. You would, if you were in hell, you would be suffering in a fire 7 times hotter than any known to man. Now, I cannot imagine that being inside of a, let's say, boiling oil. Your whole body was inside of boiling oil. Do you think that that would be more painful than any part of the crucifixion process? So, you take pain greater than was endured during the entire crucifixion process, which we said is 18 hours long, and you endure this forever, and it does not atone for anything. It's completely invaluable. Yet you are his children. His son endured torture at the most for 18 hours and died for 3 days. Again, do you think you're his son? And I have to ask you, what was the gift? What is the gift that his son gave? Oh, look at this again. And think if this is fair. God's son was born with original sin, since he was half human. He was born unable to commit a sin, so he did not have the option of failing. He suffered for 18 hours at the hands of the Romans or Jews, whatever you happen to believe. He died for a finite length of time, which was 3 days, and later ascended back to his daddy, and he had prior knowledge to all this. He did not require faith. He had knowledge of everything that was going to happen, and that he was going to go back to his daddy. He's called the Son of God. Now, do you think that old Spooky holds his son and you as humans in the same regard? There's even a scientific name given to someone who sees this much difference between their biological offspring and their step offspring. It's called, in technical terms, being a fucking asshole. I would hope, if mankind ever did find something as hideous as that piece of shit, that they would hunt it down and kill it.